40 here. I'm using my super cheap Aussie phone. So tell me how much you hate it. Like, definitely inferior video and audio quality compared to my iPhone with the Shure mic. But I get 80 gigs of data on this plan, on my Australian plan, my Australian phone, 80 gigs of data for 40 bucks. While on my iPhone, I can only buy 15 gigs of data for 50 bucks. Whoa! 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 See those porpoises? Now I wish I had my iPhone. My God. Wow. Wow. That's spectacular. That's the governor. So normally, the governor, you primarily want competence. You don't necessarily want ideology. And someone just fell off the side here. Someone just fell off the side here a year ago, taking a selfie with his girlfriend. Fell 30 feet to his death. So why was Florida so strong? Is it because Republicans have been moving to Florida? And that's why Ron DeSantis did better than expected? But Ron DeSantis went way up in the betting markets. Donald Trump plunged overnight due to the election results. It still looks like Republicans will win the House. Kari Lake is sharp. Watch as she becomes a superstar. Yeah, she is sharp. But I think in governor's races, people primarily want competence, less than ideology. So John Fetterman won. John Fetterman certainly wasn't sharp. So maybe people don't care about debate performance so much. It's time to buy Bitcoin. Bitcoin is in free fall. So why are all these tweets out there saying that people who promote Bitcoin should go to prison? All right, I don't get that. All right, why should one have to foresee every possible danger with anything you endorse? Like, why is it the responsibility of pitchmen to thoroughly and comprehensively study any product that they're pitching? Right? They're just getting paid to perform. They're actors, or they're famous people selling a little bit of their fame in exchange for money. But no, I don't think people who endorse Bitcoin or famous people who pitch Bitcoin to go to prison. I don't even understand the mindset that says these people who endorse Bitcoin should go to prison. It's not the pitchman's responsibility. So I came out very strongly against Bitcoin about 2 years ago. So only 2 years ago did I start reading up on it. And I read about 5 in-depth articles on it, became an expert. But after I looked into it, I just don't see problems that Bitcoin effectively solves unless you're a criminal. So what's going to come out of this election? Kari Lake has just started, time will tell, but she is ex-media, she knows the game. Yeah, she is very effective with the media sound bites. Sounds like she'll be Donald Trump's running mate. But as times become more serious, maybe people will put a higher premium on competence rather than sharp sound bites. So that overhanging rock, I saw this Sheila who just climbing out there on that overhanging rock. She went over the fence yesterday. I did not join her. I think crime will remain a winning issue for Republicans. And so they spent probably 5 times as much on crime in Pennsylvania as they did on inflation ads, which is good because Republicans don't really have a plan for dealing with inflation. And Republicans do have a plan for crime and lock up the super predators. Like, why is it so safe in Sydney? And why is it so unsafe in Los Angeles, New York, Washington, D.C.? It's because of the super predators. Right? If you just lock up that 1% of the population that commits vast amounts of crime, you can have safe cities again. So, time to lock up the super predators. That's just basic, blunt Republican crime platform there. Lock up the super predators, and Los Angeles would become a safe city again. Lock them up, keep them locked up until at least past age 40. Because if you let them out under age 40, more likely than not, they will re-offend within 3 months. Re-offend in the sense of getting caught. Right? How much offending are they doing without getting caught? So almost no homeless here in Sydney. So I think part of that is the difference in the American ethos of freedom versus the Australian ethos of fairness. So from an Aussie perspective, it's just not fair. People go homeless. Australians are willing to sacrifice freedom for more fairness. So there's more of a sense of collective responsibility. There's more of a communal sense in Australia. While in America, it's much more about individual freedom. Because the United States emerged out of the pre-Enlightenment. And then the post-Enlightenment, the Second British Empire, that gave birth to Australia and New Zealand, right, had much more of a sense that human beings were rational, were basically good, that you could plan a rational, cohesive, fair society, while the people who settled America came here primarily for freedom. Different understandings of freedom, whether they were Puritans or the Scots-Irish or the Quakers or the Cavaliers, but they were still all about the freedom. So one of the downsides of the tremendous freedom in America is all the homelessness and crime. Those are cockatoos, right? It's magnificent birds. America's always been a savage nation. Everyone has always fought each other. But even hard times, right now, yeah. So America has never been as homogeneous as Australia or England, let alone France or Germany, let alone Poland, let alone Japan, Korea, China. So I think Australians would be much more likely to institutionalize the mentally ill. Also, in Australia, marijuana is not legal. So I think for a significant number of people, marijuana acts as a gateway drug to harder drugs that fry their mind. And you can no longer safely do recreational drugs because of fentanyl. So many people taking cocaine or heroin laced with fentanyl and dropping dead. So the new meth and the new heroin is just frying people's brains, leading to astronomical rates of homelessness. So on Richard Spencer's show, they were talking about how capitalism is responsible for homelessness, but overwhelmingly, the homeless in America, more than 90% are alcoholics, drug addicts, and the mentally ill. Right? That's not capitalism's fault. Right? A large part of that is just drug and alcohol abuse. Now, why do people abuse drugs and alcohol perhaps at a disproportionate rate in the United States? I think maybe it has to do with the downside of freedom, less sense of community. And so when people are free, they're free to do horrible things, not just good things. Oh, okay, marijuana is legal in the ACT now for small personal amounts. That's brand new. But it's just huge in California. I mean, so many pot shops, like everyone's doing marijuana. I have not smelled marijuana since getting to Sydney 6 days ago. And I don't remember ever smelling marijuana in my 2 months here last year. So that's really nice. I haven't heard anyone talk about marijuana here. It's not nearly as big a deal, so people aren't frying their minds as likely on drugs. Also, I'm dealing with a really good class of people here in Sydney's eastern suburbs. Okay. Sit down when I pontificate. Pontificating's hard work, mate.
Hey, Richard.
Okay. So, I expected the Republicans to do better. I'll admit that. I was taken aback. So the pollsters had a pretty good night. Pollsters were basically right about these elections. Along with the pollsters, the media were pretty much right too. They were more skeptical of the red wave than Republican politicians. Republicans definitely hurt by Roe v. Wade. Republicans definitely hurt by the quality of their candidates. Crime, though, has to be a winning issue.
People are just coming in right now. Good.
So crime should be a winning issue for Republicans going forward, because Democrats can never be as law and order as Republicans. And Democrats run all the big cities, which are just crime-ridden.
So people are just coming in right now. Good.
So
I don't know, but I think people have
Democrats just don't want to talk about crime.
But
It's amazing. Going into the 1992 election, on the issue of crime, Republicans were up 14 points, but Bill Clinton turned it around so that Democrats were thought of as better dealing with issues of crime through the 1990s. And then, over the past 20 years, Republicans have generally been seen as better dealing with issues of crime by about 10 points. And now it's up to about 12 points. So
about what is going on yet. I'm just looking at
particularly strong issue for Republicans, and it should be going forward.
Really safe races. Chuck Schumer. My related question, but it's not directly about the results. Anyway, feel free to field it or not. But I saw you posted you posted an ad by that. I guess she's running for Congress. Whoa, sorry. Word call behind me. Sorry. What's going on here?
So I subscribe to Richard Spencer's Ratings Journal Substack, and there's a lot of good content on here. You really get your $6 a month worth. I mean, particularly if you look at it for intellectual entertainment, right? You're not looking at it for, responsibility and truth, but someone who doesn't care about responsibility, just letting it all hang out with hot takes. Very entertaining.
Yeah, so that woman who's running for Congress in Montana, and it was like about abortion, that campaign ad, and you just posted the link without any commentary, and I watched, it's 30 seconds, so I watched it, and I guess I didn't hate the ad, but I guess to me it almost reflected, I think, my and probably your kind of ambivalence about the issue, because here you have this white woman, very nice, pleasant, middle-aged woman, and then here she has her family, and I guess she has I forget how many daughters, and and the ad was not very aggressive, it wasn't like this, the really kind of obnoxious pro-choice stuff. It was very kind of calm, but basically saying that Zinke, or how you pronounce his name, is very anti. I don't know. So I guess to me it was you didn't really comment on it, and to me it was almost reflected well, these are the kind of people who you wouldn't want to have abortion.
I know, but it is ultimately a federal issue. I mean, I guess we could get in some comments where we're like, let's have you make abortion illegal in Montana, mandatory in Alabama or something. But
Wait, there's no inherent reason why abortion has to be a federal issue. In fact, that's the opposite of the intent of the founders. Most things should be left up to the states.
I don't think that's reasonable. And the other thing is that, I hate to sound like a shitlib here, but there are many other issues outside of just natural intelligence and race. And keep in mind that Monica Tranel has had 3 children, so she's doing fine. She's kept up her end of the bargain. The human race will survive. But I mean, there are serious issues with early prenatal testing in terms of Down syndrome, etc., that are.
Yeah, there are always other issues. Diesel and gas. The left have no more oil reserves to drain. So yeah, it's a good issue to go after the Democrats on. That the transition to green energy is much slower than the media portrays it. We've only been able to shift about 2% of our energy needs to green energy over the past 30 years. It's just a minuscule amount. And there's absolutely no evidence that green energy is going to be able to supply most of our energy needs for the next 30, 40 years. There's just absolutely no hope in sight. We're going to rely on fossil fuels for many decades to come. And it's kind of absurd to think otherwise. So what do you do when you've got an issue that you believe in strongly, but that polls really badly? So abortion, right? Many Republicans feel very strongly about abortion, but obviously it's a loser as a political issue. So there are a lot of things that we believe in
right now. Good.
Very strongly, right? That we may not want to impose on other people, that we may not want to legislate, right? Just because you believe strongly in something doesn't mean you need to legislate it, doesn't mean you need to talk about it in your campaign or in your private life, right? Just because one feels strongly about something, nothing has to inherently follow from that, particularly with politics. So it sounds like it's very much going to be in Republicans' best interest going forward to play down the whole issue of abortion. Right? It doesn't have to be on your campaign website. It doesn't have to be in your speeches. All right? You don't have to try to legislate it. You can just say that morally you're opposed to it. Unless you're in an overwhelmingly conservative state. But Kansas is pretty conservative. And they voted strongly for abortion rights.
And the ad was not very aggressive. It wasn't like this, the really kind of obnoxious pro-choice stuff. It was very kind of calm, but, basically saying that Zinke, or how you pronounce his name, is, very anti. I don't know. So I guess to me it was, you didn't really comment on it. And to me it was almost reflected like, well, these are the kind of people who you wouldn't want to have abortion.
I know. But it is ultimately a federal issue. I mean, I guess we could get in some comments where we're like,
yeah, big win for Ukraine.
Make abortion illegal in Montana, like mandatory in Alabama or something.
But Republicans have been all over the place with regard to Ukraine. Many Republicans have criticized the Biden administration for not doing enough with regard to Ukraine, that we have to get tougher, we have to send them, bigger, stronger, meaner weapons.
But I just don't think that's reasonable. And the other thing is that, I hate to sound like a shitlib here, but there are many other issues outside of just natural intelligence and race. And keep in mind that Monica Tranel has had 3 children, so she's doing fine. She's kept up her end of the bargain. The human race will survive. But I mean, there are serious issues with early prenatal testing in terms of Down syndrome, etc., that are utilized by all sorts of people. It's not necessarily eugenic, but it seems it might be kind of eugenic on a second order. It's like the amount of time you're going to invest in a child who has no future. I mean, that's really not acceptable. And there are, a lot of these edge cases, granted they're edge cases, but that doesn't mean they're less real, of, women where the fetus is barely alive and is, can't survive much longer, and they can't be aborted because they're in the 3rd trimester, and this woman is endangering her life due to this. I mean, these are granted pretty rare, but they're nevertheless real, and I think we should be serious about these things.
I wasn't really meaning that as a criticism. I just thought the ad itself was kind of odd, because it was almost like a very wholesome ad, right. But it's about this very, a lot of the abortion people are just pretty disgusting in terms of how they, and I agree, the Republican stance,
Sarah Silverman or something, where she's like, I had an abortion and I loved it, or like that.
Yeah,
I agree. That's
kind of incongruous, the ad. It was, anyway, just how, it almost like a Republican ad, the way that she was showing off her family and stuff. But another thing about the exceptions that they always talk about: incest, rape, life of the mother. Well, it's
Yeah, overall, there's no substantial difference on Ukraine between Republicans and the Democrats. There is with some Republican commentators like Tucker Carlson. But the rank and file Republican politicians are just as supportive of Ukraine as the Democrats.
Was unfortunately, that's we're all products of rape. So in the evolutionary past, I mean,
that's an interesting point. We're all products of rape in the evolutionary past. So how many generations back do you have to go in your family? Russia should be looking east, not west. Only a matter of time before China takes Siberia back. Ukraine war equals very low IQ, says the chat. But yeah, how many generations back do you have to go until you are a product of rape? Right. So I'm not aware of any raping ancestors in my line, but of course there had to be. And so we have these basic instincts that are frequently not very nice. That's why I don't agree with the Enlightenment view that human beings are basically good. I mean, men are basically rapists. If they can get away with it, they frequently do. And we are all products of rape. We have that in our DNA. Good point.
Not like people make it sound like this is like a like a minor thing, but it's like that does happen, and it happened a lot more in the past. So I mean, to me, that's to me, it's like it should be mandatory if we get rid of those genes. But anyway, that's a separate thing. Anyway,
well, I mean, just because we are going to change. I mean, it is very true that what you're saying, which is that rape.
And you can't get rid of those genes, all right? Because sex is inherently a violent act, right? It requires aggression. The man has to penetrate the woman. And so ideally you want the violence confined within marriage, but the level of violence that it takes to conquer a woman, right? That level of aggression, absolutely essential for men. Now you want it channeled in pro-social directions, but you can't eliminate those genes.
Was ubiquitous, and that there's no question we are all kind of a product of rape on some level. I mean, what you were saying is factually undeniable, but we're not living in the ancient world anymore, or the Middle Ages.
Yeah, I mean, it is, like, fortunately, it is much less common that people are, it's more in the, generations back. But I'm just saying that the Republican types, they make it sound like it's, it's like this total fringe thing, when it's, unfortunately not.
That is pretty dishonest. Yeah, I agree. The other thing, like, just talking in terms of, like, pragmatic things, I mean, how do you prove that you've been raped? Like, let's say this, like, white girl is raped by some black or something, like, and she goes to have an abortion in Texas, and how does she prove that? Are they just taking her word for it? I mean, I think it's fairly unclear, actually.
It's not to defend those laws, not to defend these draconian laws. Right? As I recall, when these laws were enacted, the provision would say that there has to be a police report, essentially, and the police report has to have been filed within a certain number of days of the rapist's occurrence. That's how.
So you don't need a conviction or something, because that could take years.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Okay. Well, I guess that is fairly reasonable. I'm glad you all added that. But there are some weird situations. I mean, what about a preteen who's raped by an uncle or her father? There's a horrifying situation like that. That is not, unfortunately, that is not as rare as it should be. I mean, that's a real thing. And are you going to file a police report on your horrible father? I mean, I don't know. It's horrible. I also.
Yeah, but if you're not willing to file a police report, then maybe there should be some privileges that don't go to you. All right. So many people say horrible things happen to them, but they never bothered to file a police report. So it's a lot harder to take allegations seriously when people don't bother to file a police report.
I mean, my grandfather was a radiologist, actually, in Louisiana, but he went to medical school and he was interning in a Catholic hospital. And it just shows kind of how, in a way, reasonable people used to be. He knew a doctor who told him this when he was doing gynecology or OBGYN, whatever it is. And he basically, when a child that would be born that could not survive, the physician would ask the nuns present to go eat lunch or something like that, and he would euthanize the baby. And it was a mercy killing.
So my mother, she was killed by an overdose of morphine. My mother was dying very slowly, painfully of bone cancer. She got down to about 50 pounds. She was 5 feet tall and 50 pounds. And eventually, something around April 28th of 1970, the doctors thought she'd suffered enough, just gave her an excess of morphine, and it killed her. So I find it hard to get upset about that. I mean, she was in pain. She was in a horrible way, and just gave her a little bit of morphine, a little bit too much. And Richard talks about his grandmother said that she didn't want to be on life support, hooked up to life support for years. So I'm not sure if they have a right to die in New South Wales, but was a big political campaign, and I believe it passed. And fundamentally, that people have the right to die, and they can contract with a doctor to kill them. And this is fairly common in many parts of the Western world.
But is he doing the wrong thing? Like, maybe the parents should be involved with that or so on. I get it, but there was just a certain kind of like realism that I think was present among previous generations. And the kind of unrealism that's present among current pro-lifers, I think, is out of control. I mean, one pretty formative thing in my life was something that I don't know if you guys remember, I've heard of, but the Terry Schiavo affair from 2000.
So why has the abortion issue become so unreasonable? Because it's become a holy issue. It's become a moral issue. It's much harder to compromise on a moral issue than a pragmatic political issue. And it's become a holy and a moral issue in America because it's a proxy for race. It's a proxy for all sorts of perspectives. It unites basically everyone right of center, right? Catholics, evangelical Christians, trads who aren't Christian can all unite behind a common opposition to abortion. So abortion is not really about abortion in America. It's a proxy for attitudes towards race and sexuality and mores.
I think it might be 2005. It was after Bush was reelected. Yeah, there was a woman who was being her life was being maintained purely through technology for I think a decade or something like this. I mean, she was brain dead, and her husband, who I believe had like remarried, and I think that added a little like twist to the whole thing. I can correct me if I'm wrong on this stuff, but he wanted to marry. Go ahead.
Yeah, he had taken up a relationship with another woman, and they had some kids together.
Okay, but still, like pretty normal, like understandable and reasonable stuff. And I mean, just the idea that you want to go die on that hill, so to speak, of like maintaining the life of someone who is totally has no rational faculty or consciousness whatsoever is just
right. You'd have to have a faith statement that you need to maintain the life of someone who's brain dead, who's hooked up to machines. Right? That's a faith statement, and it's hard to argue over a faith statement. Right? When I encounter someone who's making their position just on the basis of a leap of faith, then like you can't argue with that. There's nowhere to go in that discussion. So when these issues become moralized and rendered holy and separate from the messy world of daily politics, then they become less and less solvable.
Absolutely grotesque, in my opinion. And it's in no way trad or whatever, because she's being maintained through advanced medical technology.
And wasn't the argument that she still communicates with me and she is kind of still there? Wasn't that like one side of it?
I don't think Terry Schiavo was communicating with anyone.
There was one side. There were family members that thought that were being.
Well, if someone groans or raises up for a moment, that is something.
So Milo Yiannopoulos is going on Tim Pool's show saying people want to see blood. Does he mean that in terms of civil war? Milo is a very dramatic fellow. He's into excitement and thrills. I can't take his Christianity seriously until he makes amends to all the people that he needlessly and gratuitously hurt. Like, he was nasty unnecessarily to a lot of people. Just check out Lauren Southern's video. So Milo Yiannopoulos, like Nick Fuentes, strikes me as someone who's just using Christianity for instrumental reasons. Who cares what Milo Yiannopoulos says? Well, he was the leading right-wing entrepreneur for about 2 years running up to the 2016 election. So he's played a significant role in this country's political history. He had outsized influence. Very talented, charismatic man.
They're alive for consciousness, and there's no hope. I mean, there's got to be mercy killings in this situation. I mean, it's just everyone throughout world history was based on the subject.
So who's getting back on Twitter? Have you noticed that? Because Elon Musk started allowing some of these old diehards back on Twitter.
Yeah, I was just trying to remember like both sides of it.
What's so painful listening to the pro-choice is that it's not so much the outcome, which I think we sort of all, whether begrudgingly or sort of forthrightly agree with, but it's just their snide cynicism and nihilism, like the ridiculously stupid arguments they present about how it's not alive. Like, I have so much more respect for all these blue-haired cunts if they just said, yes, it is a child and we have the right to kill it. I mean, I would gladly agree with them in a sense that there is some type of natural right. But the fact that they're like arguing there's like a blob of cells and other ridiculous shit, it's just,
I agree. I think
it's really
that's
painful.
because they're
Well, it's really hard to determine when does life begin. I mean, you can understand that there can be various faith positions on that, and different people can come to different positions. Man, a lot of helicopters out. So I believe that the generic Judaism position is that life begins when it's viable. So not a lot of rabbis would hold that life begins at conception in the same way. It's the same quality of life as someone who's already born.
trying to like rationalize away something, and it's like,
Right, yeah.
there is a spark of life, when the sperm hits the egg. There's something. So let's not like totally lie about this. I totally agree. It's a life form, but it's not really a citizen. I think that's the distinction. That it's not really. It's not a citizen. That's the distinction.
So yeah, Dennis Prager made a good point. The question isn't so much when does life begin, but when should the right to life begin?
I would think. And then also there's just a kind of pragmatic realism of like some bad things happen. I mean, I think 1 in 5 pregnancies result in miscarriages. So miscarriages are common. And there's the issue of Down syndrome and other mal effects like that. And then there are just these granted edge cases. But when we're talking about an edge case, it's not really like being struck by lightning. I mean, it's much more common than 1 in a million or whatever that is. I mean, these really serious issues where, like, I mean, again, these are reported out in Nature publications. I don't think they're lying. There are women whose child like can't make it and is now like in her stomach, but she can live. Like, it's not a direct threat to her life, but there's like a possibility of her becoming septic or something. It's just like, guys, seriously, like this situation is bad enough. Like, let's, you have to allow people to.
I feel like the average IQ of the Richard Spencer participant in these group calls on his Radix Journal Substack is probably pretty high, around 120. Like, a lot of good quality conversations.
Terminate the pregnancy and just kind of move on with their life. They can have another child. I mean, you've got to just not be this obsessed with this issue and just black and white moralism.
Yeah, it's from on a level of like grad school debate in a sense. The pro-life side, it's almost always presented in these sweeping philosophical abstractions.
Well, saying that people should not be obsessed with this or that. Republicans haven't run in part on abortion because it doesn't work. Like, it has worked to unite large parts of their base. Now, overall, abortion is much more of a winning issue for Democrats than for Republicans. But to win the Republican nomination, Republicans have increasingly found absolutely necessary to be pro-life.
Or in these saccharine terms of like, well, we love the babies and so forth. They never do want to get down to the nitty gritty in the way that we are in this conversation, talking about these cases, like the real impacts these things have on women's health, the real difficulties these laws cause in the world that we're living in. Just want to make it sorry.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, I think I mentioned this on one of these calls like a year and a half ago, but this was back in 2002 or 2003, some around that time. So I was a young man out of college, and my grandfather actually had died, and it was a quick and a good death. He was actually out hunting when he died. Perfect death for him in many ways because he loved hunting, bird hunting. And my grandmother really kind of fell off the cliff. She lost her husband. I noticed that. But anyway, we were in the hospital. I mean, I talked to my mom about this not too long ago, actually. But we were in the hospital, and she was really in a very serious situation, and she was being revived. And we did tell the nurses, like, we can't go on this. Like, this is becoming grotesque. And again, according to pro-lifers, I'm a murderer. Give me a break. My grandmother, like, I loved her more than anything, and it was not actually even much of a moral dilemma for both her daughter and her grandson. Like, we both, it was becoming sick, and it was just really not a choice. You have to kind of deal with really serious issues like this in life, and it doesn't mean that you're a bad, immoral person or something like this. I even remember specifically that my grandmother told me many times when I was a child, she knew someone who was kept on life support for 8 years or something. She would always tell me, like, Richard, just pull the plug. Don't make me go through that. It's a kind of torture. And she did tell me that specifically, but even if she had not, clearly we made the right decision. What, were we going to revive this woman in very bad health and keep her alive for 2 more days of consciousless existence? I mean, I'm not that cruel. So I just think, when you've gone through something, and I even imagine a lot of pro-lifers have gone through a situation like that and don't think of themselves as murderers, but when they're given this dilemma, they kind of like to morally signal. But, you've got to be truthful and realistic about these matters.
I mean, it might mean you're a moral person because doing the right thing even when it's hard.
Exactly. And Richard, to be honest, it wasn't that hard. This is just horrible.
Yeah. Richard, do you remember what the other? I remember the Terry Shiloh thing was like a really heated debate. What was like the other side saying?
Well, they were making, you know, comments like what you made about how, you know, who knows, she might really be there or something. But they were mostly like slippery slope arguments. The kind of like, this is going to bring about death panels, and, you know, soon we'll just be able to murder everyone who turns 50 or something. I mean, it's just.
Yeah, I think the conservative position is that there isn't such a sharp distinction between the fetus and the baby. Remember, the liberal position is that we're autonomous, buffered, strategic, rational, basically good individuals. The conservative position is that we're not buffered, that there isn't these clean-cut distinctions between fetus and baby, between brain dead and heart dead, that we're not buffered individuals, but that we're part of a community. And so that, you know, what happens to someone who's brain dead and hooked up to life-saving technology, that still has an effect on the wider community. So it's the difference between the modern liberal, buffered, strategic, autonomous self and the porous self of the traditionalist who believes that we're affected by what's going on around us.
It's just ridiculous.
Richard, by the way, remember our
It's
bet?
not ridiculous, it's just the difference between two different conceptions of self. A traditional medieval conception of self and a modern liberal Enlightenment conception of the self.
About whether Nick Fuentes was going to advocate voting Republican in the midterms?
Oh.
Yeah.
It was about, hold on. Was it about the midterms or 2024?
Midterms.
Okay,
Whether he's,
okay, I'll accept. Why don't you hear?
no, it was for $100, but I'm a man of my word. I'm a man of my word. I'll stick to it. Actually, I haven't been watching it. I'm going to do some research and I'm going to screen record it. So, yeah, I'll find out. But yeah, I can't stay on tonight. I just wanted to say that before. It's like,
Okay. You might be able to wiggle out of it because he'll say something like, don't.
So what's the philosophy of the hate watcher? Lawrence, I get you hate the show, you despise the show. So why do you even watch? Some people, watch shows that they absolutely hate. I never do this, so I don't quite understand the psychology or the thinking or the predisposition of people who watch shows that they loathe.
If Mortem was a ballot, you pull that lever.
Oh no! See, the deal was that would be you winning. The deal was if he's advocating voting for Republican, we're all you win.
Okay, well, I think that one.
All right, talk to you later, guys.
All right.
I'm a bit confused. What's the did he say that you said that Nick Fuentes wouldn't promote?
I think this came from like late 2020 or 2021. And
it's that
basically, Dylan was like, oh, but I just listened to Nick Fuentes, and he's just so angry with the Republican Party, he hates them. And what I said is like, look, the rubber hits the road at some point. Like, he is going to tell you to go vote Republican shortly.
Yeah, that sounds like something you would say. So yeah.
Yeah. Much like with the whole Yang Gang phenomenon, or even I think I wasn't the only one to kind of flirt with Bidenism in some way, where it's like, well, who cares? What's the difference between Trump and Biden? Trump is not so bad. But again, it's like when the rubber hits the road, they're going to order you to vote for the GOP. All right, Ryan. Shit. Oh my God. In Ohio, okay, 43%. Ryan is up. Tim Ryan.
Yeah, well, J.D. Vance won fairly convincingly, by more than 4 percentage points in Ohio. No longer such a swing state, much more of a red state like Florida.
After they count day of ballots. And early voting goes to the Democrats. So, wow, this is pretty interesting. Tim Ryan's up by 30,000 votes. Wow. Fetterman is up 25. Holy shit. 18% reporting, he's up 25. Oh my God, are we seeing a blue wave? I should have stuck with my prediction from 2 months ago. Wow, Warnock is up 4, but that's 62%. That's pretty high. That's like a real sample and stuff.
Hey, Richard, I was watching a little bit of Crystal and Sagar.
So, yeah, Richard says I should have gone with my gut. How often do we say that? Should have gone with my gut. My gut is always right. I think when Richard and when I say something like that, we all tend to have blinkered views. I guarantee you that my gut is not always right. I guarantee you that your gut is not always right. I guarantee you that Richard Spencer's gut is not always right. But we have such a blinkered understanding of both ourselves and others.
And according to Crystal, she was saying that the Democrats are going to end up doing really well because she had some behind-the-scenes data or something. So,
interesting.
Yeah.
Holy shit, I should have stuck with my fucking gut. Oh my God, I used my head as opposed to my gut. Oh my God, I was right.
I think Fetterman's going to win. Warnock's going to win. I'm really hoping Ryan wins. I'm afraid Lake will probably win in Arizona, that obnoxious woman.
Yes.
And let's not forget about Nevada.
Would you not agree?
So ideally you want your head and your gut kind of lining up. All right. when it's your gut versus your head, you get torn up. So yeah, Lawrence Connor says, sometimes I'm interesting, but frequently I leave him uninspired.
Okay.
Would you mind agree with me? Would. With Kerry Lake.
Like 20 years ago.
I'm older. Are you older than me, I think?
No, I
So yeah, Kerry Lake is an incredibly compelling, charismatic person, but the compelling and the charismatic don't necessarily make for more competent leaders, right? So people who are good on TV and snappy with the comebacks aren't necessarily more effective at governing.